I'm pretty passionate about the entrepreneurship process and certainly the community that we have here in New York that supports all of us entrepreneurs.
You know we're in Denver, right? Hi everyone, I'm Krista Morgan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of P2Bi Investor. We provide lines of credit for growing businesses. We're a fintech company based here in Denver. I am a first-time entrepreneur, but we are actually sort of on the verge of closing our last round with RBC, so we've taken about $8 million in angel funding, done a lot of syndication, which is I think why they invited me onto the panel, and yeah, looking forward to talking to you all.
I am. I'm John Paller. I'm founder and CEO of Lakeshore. We're a two-sided curated marketplace connecting employers and candidates. I've been involved with the RBC for about a little over 2 years. I actually pitched at this event 2 years ago. So we've now raised about $2 million in syndicated funds, so which I think is, again, probably why I was asked to be on the panel. We're also in the process of completing our second RBC raise, which we are, for better or worse, trailblazing some guinea pig territory for syndicating with other angel groups. Also, some online platforms and things with the RBC.
I'm Nicole Montoya. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Cheddar. Has nothing to do with cheese. It's also a fintech company. Cheddar actually means money. I'm a first-time entrepreneur and started Cheddar about 2 years ago. Went through the process here at RBC. To date, we've raised about $750,000, and I'm kind of speaking to the angel list syndication on a platform experience. We did that through Foundry Group's FG Angels Syndicate. We're raising some more money here too.
Great, welcome.
Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for those introductions. All right, let's launch into some questions and then we'll leave some time at the end. Dave, will you just cue me? Okay. I'll open this up to whomever wants to grab it. How did you launch your relationship with your lead, and how did it start and how did it evolve? And do you have a close business relationship with your lead investor today?
All right. So yes, our lead in our first round is now our chairman in terms of how we started the relationship. Most of you know, I founded the company with my dad, so he was a friend of my dad's, and then now I would also consider him a friend. So yeah, it really started, he sort of watched the company for probably a year and a half as we got raised a seed round and then came in and led our first sort of major funding round. And yeah, we have a great relationship. It's been added a lot of value to the business.
So I guess I should have said that we at CirrusMD have a sort of three-party syndication. So we have RBC, New York Angels, and then Sand Hill Angels in California. And we have leads in each of those, with each of those groups. And each of them was a personal relationship. Here at RBC, Praful Shah, who was right there, was our lead, was our original lead, as well as as Peter and some of the other key people at RBC, who I knew personally. In New York, we went to a gentleman who was one of their key healthcare investors. Ours is a digital healthcare company, because I knew that this guy would be somebody interested. And then in Sand Hill Angels, one of my partners knew, again, somebody who was focused on digital health and who became our champion in that group. And currently, the gentleman from Sand Hill is on our board and has been an invaluable advisor as we go forward in our business, and it might actually become a strategic partner with his business and ours. And then the person in New York is not on the board, but a valuable contributor to the business. And here we have one of the key members of RBC who's on our board, representing the entire syndicate, including Praful and Peter. So it's been a great operation. Furthermore, all three of those gentlemen know each other and work together.
So my experience was we had a friendly DC in the Valley that was acting as kind of lead, but then interestingly, just given proximity and kind of distance, the RBC kind of stepped up as kind of quasi-lead, and then we, out of that, actually found quite a large investor that has now become kind of co-lead. So both of them actually sit on our board now. So one was, known to us previously, and then the other was introduced to us through this process. And again, with kind of Peter and some of the other guys, we had one of them really kind of step up and kind of take lead position.
Quickly, our lead was Foundry Group again by FT Angels, and I worked with Seth over there, who I think was the keynote yesterday, so probably got to understand his perspective a little bit, hopefully. And he's served as a great lead. That relationship started through through classical networking that happens every day. One of our advisors is a friend of his and had done business with him, and so really just kind of helped vet me as a human, and then worked with the due diligence process with Seth, just in terms of traction and numbers. And I think being a lead of that type of a syndication is maybe a little bit different than what some of you guys are all speaking to. So for us, Seth has really served as an advocate. He's not in the day-to-day business, obviously. But I can't say enough about Foundry Group. They're just able to open doors, and they're certainly willing to do that.
Very good, thank you. Having a lead investor on your deal to act as an advocate is vital. How did your lead investors play that role for you going through syndication?
I'll speak to that. I think the most important thing that a lead investor can do is be the billboard for the company without being the company. I think for me, I've come from a sales background. I can give a mean pitch, but at the end of the day, it's my baby. I think it's cute. So you need that validation, and really that lead investor acts as that validation. So you've got to have somebody who's willing to be the champion. If you're considering being a lead investor, understand what you're signing up for. I mean, you are really, really needed by your investment portfolio company to, stick your neck out of your shell a little bit. Maybe some people that are newer to the space aren't necessarily sure about that, but we had that. We had guys that were willing to, proselytize our business and really connect with other angels, overcome objections, talk to them about the concerns they might have. Because entrepreneurs, we can try to do it, but there's always a filter with us, right? So we are the company you're investing in, so you have to evaluate us independently as investors. So I think coming from that third party person who's got skin in the game makes a big difference.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with all of that. And the only thing I would have to add is that at the end of the day, even when working with an angel group as opposed to individual angels, raising money in an angel round is still a sales process, and you have to sell each individual angel on coming in, by and large. Now, interestingly, the folks at Sandhill had a process that was sort of transparent to us, and the lead investor in their process was everything was sort of done apart from us. But every other angel round I've ever raised, you have to close angels one by one. Working with an angel group helps because at least they're all in the same place. And having that lead investor, as you mentioned, validates the process. It just makes it that much easier. Otherwise, you tend to get lost in the shuffle of all the other deals that were up here the last day and a half. So how are you going to be the one that everybody looks at as opposed to everybody else? Well, having an advocate on the inside is that way.
100%.
So Krista, when you're a lead investor, what one piece of advice will you give a company raising money through syndication?
It's a tough question. I hope to be a lead investor one day. What one piece of advice? Look, I think the thing about syndication is you're not there, right? We love working with RBC, and I know a lot of, I get to meet investors and I'm in the community, and so, but when you're syndicating, you really, we've been syndicating with the Tech Coast Angels out of San Diego, and I've had to go to San Diego a couple of times, but you're far, and they're seeing all these companies right in their backyard, and you have to try to convince them, hey, give some of your angel dollars into a company in Denver. So I think if I'm a lead investor talking to the company doing it, I would say, you do need to allocate travel time, and you want to get out there. Like, I do not suggest 4-hour diligence meetings over the phone. It's really terrible experience. And on both sides, it's terrible being the person answering diligence questions over the phone. And I think you just have to be really organized, right? And that's sort of my rule for all angel funding. Have good documentation, be ready to answer questions, be really prompt with your responses, make them feel like you're really engaged with them, even though you aren't face-to-face in their community all the time.
Who else has some advice?
I would just say you got to do whatever it takes. I've actually, I get kind of fired up about this one because I've watched now hundreds of pitches, and I've seen only a handful of them again, right? So, you go to these pitch events, you see a ton of companies, you see a lot of enthusiasm, and you got to wonder what is it about, that happened. And I don't think there's a shortage of bad ideas. I think there's lots of great ideas out there. The one piece of advice I'd give is the only way to fail is to quit. You got to have a good plan, and you got to be willing to kiss the frogs. If it means you got to get on a plane and you got to go schlep it for $500 and spend money where you don't know if you're going to get a return, you just do it. You never know. There's always a 5-minute nugget in there somewhere where amongst all of that body of work, there's going to be some yield. There's going to be maybe a miracle breakthrough. Like one of our investors came from a last-minute meeting where it was a kind of a follow-on, maybe toss something on the stack. I just want to kind of jump in the pool with the rest of the guys, and it turned into a $500,000 investor. So you just don't know. So you can't prejudge the process. You just got to do it, and you got to keep doing it every day when you don't want to do it. Because trust me, none of us up here love doing this. This is not, raising capital is not an easy sport. It seems fun and glamorous when you get the checks, but that's fleeting because then you got to go run a business, right? And a lot of times you're doing it concurrently. So it's that fortitude. You gotta hang in there and just do the work.
I would just wholeheartedly agree with John and to piggyback on what you said, Krista. I think for me, in person is so important. Like it's hard to really articulate passion or anything just over a quick phone call, so I've had no luck in person.
Well, I agree with that 100%. I think the reason for that is, let's be honest, in the angel world, it's very interpersonal. I mean, you're betting on the jockey and a pipe dream, really, let's be honest here. I mean, most of what we're talking about, these aren't certainties. There's very few chip shots out there that are going to just be guaranteed deals. So what you're really investing in is the people. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to be willing to spend the time with the people. And you got to talk to them, and you got to explain your business, and you're going to feel like you're a broken record, and you're going to do and say the things that you have to do, but it takes time. You got to do the face.
Well, and let's not forget that after you close the deal, you got to keep that that dialogue open and up. The game does not end when the check comes in.
No.
Because what you want is those people to know and love you and understand what you're doing when you go raise the next round.
Absolutely.
Doing the follow round.
Actually, I've seen that before, where companies will raise angel capital, they get the checks, and then it's radio silence. And I'm sure the angel investors, I'll get some nods out of this in the audience, but nobody likes to put money into a deal where they feel like it goes down into the radio silence mode, right? Like, people want to participate with you, and we're personally very, on a quarterly basis, very intentional about offering visibility, transparency into their investment, because again, that relationship doesn't end 100% right.
Right. The worst thing, even worse than going radio silent, is going radio silent, then popping back up when you need more money.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you have so much bad news to report.
Right.
Don't do that.
Well, and actually for entrepreneurs that are doing this, you know, one of the things that we've done, and whether we've done it perfectly or not, is whether or not we're raising capital, which seems to be more frequent than not, we're always giving updates. We're always inviting for happy hours. We're always doing things just to be engaged. So when it does come up that we need money, which is inevitable, it's not as annoying.
So it's your baby, but it's your investor's checkbook.
So
It's not, it's your baby, but it's your investor's checkbook.
You
It's very
absolutely
personal.
have. I mean, you got to treat this like you would any other relationship. Anytime you use somebody for money, well, how's that going to turn out? When's the last time you had a friend borrow money from you and never pay you back? You're not very happy about it, right? So investors don't like the same thing. So you have to be honoring of the relationship, because that's what it is. Angel investors, more than anybody else, are looking for that connection in that relationship.
So Chris, I'll let you lead off this next response. How much time is appropriate, in your opinion, for a group to have to review your deal if it's being syndicated from your home angel group?
Yeah. How much do we want, or how much is appropriate? Well,
In your opinion.
my opinion. Well, I think that absolutely depends on the level of work that your home angel group has done. Here in Colorado, we're fortunate because RBC has a very robust due diligence process that generates actual reports that can be shared. And they do a very good job of that. They have people that actually, professionals that help in that process. And I can tell you that work went a long way towards, and in my case, RBC was first, as you would expect. And that work went a long way towards getting the folks in New York and in California comfortable with what we were doing. And so that probably, you know, if we spent 2 months with RBC in diligence, we might have spent 2 or 3 weeks after of work, after the personal touch. Yeah, I flew out to New York, we flew out to California and met everybody. But the actual diligence was minimal. And then for our follow-on round, it was led by Three Leaf Ventures, which is a local fund here in Colorado. And they did a good deal of follow-on due diligence on what had transpired in the year since our first round. And that then was shared with the key people, the deal leads in New York and California, and actually here in Colorado as well, and shortcut that process immensely. So again, I think it really just depends on the amount of work and the quality of work in your home angel group. And to your point, you want to facilitate that as much as possible. You want to be ready. You want to make sure that your initial angels understand you and everything is, all your ducks are in a row to make their job easier, to make the syndication process go smoothly.
I would add though that I think most angel groups, from what I've seen in the syndications, they like to still follow their own process. And so you want to be mindful of their process. Like even with Tech Coast, what helped your local lead angel group is going to get you the intro and like kind of put in a good word for you. But then most of the time, you're still going to go through their screening committee, their pitch process, whatever they go through. And so as an entrepreneur, you have to leave enough time. Like you do not, I don't care how good you are. And I think all of us up here are pretty good. Like we don't raise angel rounds. Like 3 months, that's like, you have done great if you've raised an angel round in 3 months. Especially one that's being syndicated. You have to allow for the time to wait for their next monthly meeting, you know, their next screening committee, whatever it is. And it's very, I think if you have very good relationships, maybe you can move it along faster, but in my experience, you have to just go with their process and it's hard to circumvent it because, you know, it works for them and fair enough, right? You're asking them for money, you go through their process.
I think the entrepreneur's answer for that is you'd like to spend as little as time as possible. You know, any minute that you're spending giving people historical information or future crystal ball information about maybes or was-bees is not running your business, which is the most important thing, right? But I think to Krista's point, you know, you got your hat in your hand, and you have to have a level of humility with that because. You know, I've actually heard this where people have said things like, well, you know, that's too much diligence. Just give them this. And I'm like, right, okay, so I'm supposed to tell the guy with the checkbook that I'm not going to give him what he wants because of some reason that I shouldn't have to give it to him. It's the price of admission. If you want to get a deal done, you have to be willing to be flexible. Now, there are boundaries to this. You know, I've personally been in situations where it's like, okay, you know, you have to weigh the cost benefit of your time, and there are ways to do that respectfully. To say, look, I've got to kind of draw a line here, and here's why. I mean, if they're going to be a good fit investor, they're also going to understand and respect that you've got other things to do than just, you know, push paper around and give information. So there's balance, I think, you can find. But,
yeah, I agree with that. I think those bonds, what's nice about working with a well-run organization, angel group, like the ones we've been talking about here, is that because they do have a process and they're professionalized in a certain sense, often you will avoid the sort of one-off angel who doesn't quite get it or might waste your time. And that is an issue. That is a very real risk when dealing with angels, and I think again that's one of the values of going through a group that kind of gets it on their end and respects your time and has a process.
Yeah, one of the benefits though I think of the diligence process in honoring it is you actually also find, I think David Goldman mentioned this morning, alignment in investors. Like you'll actually see pretty quickly how aligned they are with your company based on the questions they ask or the things they request from you and how much time they expect. It's actually quite a leading indicator on what is to come. So if they invest in your company and they're super detailed and way over analytical, and I say that respectfully, but they just happen to be operating from the left side of the brain more, that's going to be how it is. Like, so yeah, it also gives the entrepreneur an opportunity to kind of figure out where alignment is. I think it's a secondary benefit, but certainly one.
I think that alignment is important, especially in terms of when you're making a decision on whether or not to spend time with investors. But I often can sense right out of the gate whether someone has the appetite for consumer transactional business like my own. And sometimes just, I'm fine with the conversation not proceeding because I know it will be too hard of a battle for them. And there's nothing more frustrating than spending, hours or days with an investor and then just having to walk away. It happens all the time. Do what it takes, like you said before. It's part of the equation. But I think if you sense those signs, at least I'm learning to sense those signs earlier so I can spend time where it's more meaningful.
So as you were getting your ducks in a row, so to speak, have you learned or have you become more efficient as you've gone through the syndication process?
Yes and no. Frogs still look like frogs until you kiss them. So, you don't know, right? I admit, unless you guys have a better recipe to know who's going to be a good investor and who's not, but Some of it just takes the time to do it. You just got to talk to a lot of people. Like I said before, I've had people that I thought were going to be awesome investors, and then either fell off the earth or just didn't work out for whatever reason. And I've had other people that you just maybe passed an initial judgment on, and you thought something about, and boom, they end up being something completely different.
Yeah, I think to your point about getting more efficient with syndication, I certainly would be getting more efficient on the materials preparation side, because it's really, just making sure, like I've got a folder and it's got all my core, every investor wants the same 5 documents the first time you talk to them, and making sure the numbers are updated at the end of every month. I have a reminder to just go in and say, here are the latest numbers so that everything is accurate. Those are the little things that if you get into a routine of having your stuff ready all the time, it just gets you to a meaningful conversation about whether this is a good investment for them much faster. And certainly when you're syndicating, you want to make sure everyone has the same information. You haven't sent different information to one person, not another. So I think when you deal with a lot of angel investors, you will become more efficient. Absolutely.
Right. Good input.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a syndication, a function of syndication. It's just a function of having done it several times, yeah.
So moving on, talking about traditional syndication versus platform syndication. Guess who gets to lead with this one? So Nicole, you did leverage a platform like AngelList. And how do you think this differed from working with an angel group primarily?
I think it was wildly different. It was an interesting experience. It was extremely efficient, which is brilliant if you're an entrepreneur, but very different. So in terms of due diligence, I think something really important if you're going to go use a platform is finding a good lead. And so FG Angels couldn't find one any better. So that was great, and there's huge benefits that come with that. Creates tons of awareness from really prominent investors all over the country. You've got advocates all over the country. That's great. But those are people that you can go back to in the follow-on round. It creates awareness just in general. For a while we were ranked #1 on AngelList, so that's just great exposure across the board. But the process is just very different, and it was a little bit of an unknown going into it. There's blogs that you can read on it. We did ours in the fall of 14, so it was a while ago. My hunch is that it's even better now in terms of knowing what you're getting into as an entrepreneur. But it's kind of a wild ride. It's really quick. It happens in a couple of weeks. Founder group vets you. They put you up there. They already have known investors. And then all of a sudden, we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars that people have kind of committed. And that's part of the learning curve. You're like, woohoo, we just raised $800,000 in like a day. That's amazing. But then it kind of goes back. I don't know that we want to get into the weeds of how that platform works. We certainly can. But they have a certain number of people that are involved in the syndicate. They all put in a certain amount. And then kind of over the course of the week or 2 weeks, however long that remains active, people either commit in or commit out. So then you kind of whittles down. I think a frustrating part of it is that you're limited by the technology, and so my instinct and my desire was to talk to every one of those individuals who wanted to put in X amount. But you really don't have that ability. There's a certain number of emails that you can send, and then after that you're kind of locked out unless they start following you. So all of those things are in place for a reason. But as an entrepreneur, I would do it a little bit differently just in terms of that. So I'll stop with that.
May I ask a question? Now that you have the entrepreneurs year-round from AngelList, what is it like to work with that pool of angels who don't necessarily know each other? And do you have any experience having worked with an angel group as well? And is there any difference, in terms of your relationship and your ongoing working interaction with your angels?
Yeah, I bet I should have looked this up before I came, but maybe 40 to 50 people come in underneath that syndicate. And I bet I interact meaningfully with maybe 3 of them. And meaningfully is not anything like you would interact with an angel, with a fellow angel group. So they're riding on good choices that the lead of the syndicate makes. They want to ride that wave, and they want to spread the word in their area if it makes sense. But surprisingly, a lot of them are actually interested in, not surprisingly, but I wasn't necessarily anticipating it, but a lot of them are interested in following on it, maybe because of traction and what we achieved. But it's for them, it's a great introduction to a deal they wouldn't have had an introduction to otherwise. But it's not a tight relationship at all.
So during that last minute rush when you're trying to close your round, were there investors that you had circled in your syndicate that ended up dropping out at the last minute or making a last minute term request? Does anybody want to talk about that?
I didn't get any term change requests, but I think for a good rule of thumb, if you're going to get an angel group to help you, the first goal is to get followers, just like any other platform, right? You want to get people following the deal. I did as many as you can, because really it's a function of numbers. It boils down to batting average, just like everything else. And I would say it's probably half. At least that seemed to be kind of the number that we got. Half end up investing. And it's not, most of it's not personal when they don't. It's just, the stock market this, or my retirement fund that, or my wife said no, or, I mean, literally, you're going to hear it all, and it has nothing to do with you. It's like dating, just for investors, right? So it's going to boil down, which is why I say just get as big a followers list as you can. So, of course, we had people say, yeah, they were in, they even tell you that, or then they don't, or they back off how much they were going to do. It unfortunately doesn't go the other way as frequently, where they go, I was thinking about doing 10K, but let me think about $500,000. That would be, obviously anybody's dream, but it unfortunately, it happened to us once, but for the other time, just from a ratio standpoint, it doesn't happen that much.
So the way we approached both of our initial and our follow-on round was, in terms of terms, I'll address that part of the question. We really tried to approach the negotiation of the term sheet from a middle ground, both in terms of valuation. Maybe we could have argued for a little bit more, but we didn't. In terms of governance terms, we tried to keep everything very plain, vanilla, and very simple, very industry standard for a couple of reasons. First, we didn't want to give ourselves any heartburn when we wanted to, down the road when we go to raise an institutional round, because you have to realize that anything that you ask for, or that the investors ask for, quite frankly, that are maybe a little bit aggressive, well, the venture capital is coming in. If you're going to raise a big round, won't want that and more. So you're setting a precedent. So that's one thing to keep and actually, there were a couple of specific terms that our investors did ask for that we pushed back on, specifically for that reason, pointing out that, guys, if you enjoy them now, when we go raise, if we raise $20 million, well, all that's going to be on top of your head as well. So we really tried to steer our expectations and our investors to a very middle ground, understanding that no one's going to make or lose money at the margin on these terms. They're going to make or lose money on how we execute. And that gets to the second reason why we did that. Any minute you spend arguing about a term in a term sheet is a minute you don't get to spend managing your business, or the minute you don't have the money you're trying to raise that you can use to hire somebody to help build your business. And at this point, you just can't afford to do that. You have to get the round done as quickly as possible. It's still going to take you months to do, so let's not put any additional roadblocks in. Let's try to make the deal priced fairly so that people will write checks and move on to the more important things.
Yeah, agreed. I think general, for me, certainly we've had plenty of people say, yes, we're in, and then they come out, or maybe they come in a later round, or whatever it is. I usually, once we hit about 60% committed on the round, it goes. So new people will come in, you'll sort of have people you weren't talking to that will hear about your deal. So word gets around once you're, I don't know, there's momentum, deals have momentum, and once you hit it, you'll know, and we find it usually closes, and they're always last minute changes. And on the terms, I think again, it depends on the size of your round. Generally, once we're more than 50% committed through, I would hesitate to change a term just because I'm like, well, 50% of these people, all these other people already said yes. So unless they're writing a serious check, and serious is just what's the size of your round, and is it sort of, if they're going to write 20% of your round, it's like a serious number, and so you can sit down and say maybe there's a side letter, we just had an angel, like our group out of San Diego is saying, well, if we bring in all this money, can we have a board seat? And so we're having a separate discussion with them about that that'll run into a side agreement, which is normal.
Very good, thank you. Nicole, I'm going to ask one final question, then we'll open it up for the audience. But knowing what you know today, and I'll let you guys just kind of filter back this away, knowing what you know today, if you were to start over again, what would you do differently?
I could give you so many things.
Pick one.
Yeah. No, I think momentum is a really big deal. I actually hate the concept of momentum because sometimes you're manufacturing it, sometimes it's legit. I think I probably would have raised more in our angel presentation. I think it would have given us more runway. I think people probably always say that. Raise more. But yeah, I mean, it's not hindering us significantly, but it would certainly make life a little easier.
Good input. John?
What would I do differently? Kind of like Nicole, I mean, there's so many things that you look back in the rearview mirror, and there's a reason why that's that big and the windshield's this big, right? Because I'm looking forward. I guess I didn't know what I didn't know. There was an education process for me, and fortunately, we have a group like the RBC that, as much as they put deals together, it highly emphasized on education. So I would say I would have educated myself more, but I did. So I actually took the time to take all the courses and learn all this stuff, and I was kind of geeking out in the front row, taking my notes with my 59-page pitch deck. So there's all sorts of things that you gotta. But if I look back and say what would I have changed, we were successful. So I don't know. Could we have raised more capital? Could we have? Yes, that would have been nice, right? I think with any, but then you probably spend more. So it'd probably be in the same spot. So I don't know. I guess. I don't know that I would have changed much. I would probably say that it's been very formative for me as a founder and CEO. I wouldn't be who I am today without having gone through it. And, if my outcome were different, I might say something different, like I should have stuck with it, or I shouldn't have quit so early, or I shouldn't have, but we didn't have that outcome, so.
Good. Krista?
Oh, agreed. I don't, I would certainly, I think it's harder to in your earlier stage, you're trying to learn, the thing is that if you're starting a company and you go out and you start pitching, you start talking to angel investors, and you listen, if you actually open yourself to feedback, you will learn an amazing amount about your business from the people you're talking to, from the way they react to how you're talking about it, and it makes your company better, I think. But again, I feel very happy with the process we've gone through, and I don't think you can shortcut. The thing is, there's no substitute for standing up in front of investors 10, 20, 50. I've probably pitched our company I was kind of thinking about the other day, over the past 4 years, I've probably spoken to like 500 angel investors, no less than that, right? That is a lot. And so, will I be better on my next venture? Hopefully, yes, and I'll have a great exit, and all my angels will be happy and invest in my next round, in my next company. But I really wouldn't. I like John, put a lot of time into the fundraising process. I put a lot of my energy, and it's paid off. And I think it's the people that aren't willing. It's the founders that, if you're not willing to put the time into it, then your chances of success go way down. Because there are, as to Chris's earlier point, there are a lot of companies that are looking for money, and it's the founders that are going to go above and beyond, that are really going to, focus on giving your angel investors a great experience, even just in all their interactions with you, that they will be successful.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. This was my third time around this game, and it's hard, it's arduous, but I don't know if there's anything I could have done substantially to improve the process.
Okay, thank you all. Do we have any questions out there? Seriously?
Yeah, Kimberly, since you raised your funding through AngelList, did any of those investors have a seat on the board?
Oh, you do not. Yeah, no, they did not. No one asked. They were all, each one of these individuals was putting in pretty small amounts. And you've got, 40 plus people putting money in. I think the largest check, was 50,000, but then it was 25, and then there were 10, 5s, 2s. So it just wasn't at the stage where people were asking for that, the round we're doing now. We anticipate that happening.
Are you doing discounts for AngelList?
We're not. No, it's a very, very different approach this time. Very different amount of time spent.
As an investor in John, Krista, and Chris's company, I'm looking for a successful exit. It's not a question, it's more like a comment. You talked about the reports and updates, and obviously all three of you are doing phenomenal there. And one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize is in the next round, the Series A, Series B, especially around here, those guys do call me up. So it's really critical for not around to invest, but the venture funds do call the angel investors for their opinion before they invest. That's one part of the due diligence, and that's another reason you want to make sure that you update the existing investors.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's like anything in life, right? Your bank gets called for references, your employers get their calls for references, well, your investors are going to get called for references, because it's past results or a future indication, right? So how you treat people, how you communicate, how you're transparent, how just how you generally handle yourself, and how respectful you are of not only time but the process. I totally agree. Totally agree.
So in terms of looking at maybe doing it differently next time, or for what fundraising you did do, did any of you consider looking at more seed stage VC firms as opposed to angel groups for the source of really the first money in?
Well, if you know the Denver ecosystem for funding, there's not a ton of seed stage VCs here. So unless you're in Boulder in an accelerator, or you're going to move to California, it's difficult to do that, and neither of which I was going to do. We did talk to some, but with that, a lot of times it's not different with angel groups that like to invest locally. A lot of them, micro VCs, like to keep control of their investments. There are some that will do it. And then secondly, VCs think differently about investments than angels do. And that's not one bad or the other, or better than the other. It's just, they're just different in how they think. We did talk to some, but found, it was just, getting access to them, getting introductions, and then just fitting their criteria at that such early stage is very challenging to do. So that's what we found.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's funny, when we started raising 3 years ago, there just weren't, it wasn't as popular to have all the seed stage funds, so by the time they started wanting to talk to us, we were like too late, and we already had a lead, and they wanted to lead, so I think you do have to sort of choose early on that. One thing I will say though is, to your point, is it is not easy to manage a cap table of a lot of people. So just get used to the fact people have some paperwork. Last week I sent out 77 personalized emails to people on the cap table getting signatures to convert into the new round. And so that's a lot of time, 77 emails. So just that is something, if you can, I might be more creative on like how we set up LLCs or try to group people and think about voting rights and all that stuff so you can still get stuff done.
Well, that's a perfect segue to put in a plug for our hosts here. Because, managing a cap table, and I can't imagine what yours is like, unless it came under the...
It's all under.
Oh, it comes under the syndicate. Well, that's good, because one of the beauties of working with an angel group that does LLCs, such as RBC does or Sandhill, is that you can have 10 or 20 people provide money to one entity that sits on your cap table. And that's a real value down the road. Don't minimize how much time that can save you.
I think David Gold talked about that this morning with the point he was making was, when you have 77 people on your cap table, God bless you, and good luck, to you. It becomes an administrative nightmare. I mean, you have to, if you want to extend terms or if you want to issue something, you got to get voting approval from everybody on the cap table, or at least a majority in a lot of cases, which means you still got to send it out to everybody and see what comes back. That's a lot of work. We've been fortunate enough to keep ours fairly consolidated. I think we've got 25-ish investors total, but we've got 4 on the cap table, 4 total entries. So because we've got some LLCs and we've got some, other things just to keep it clean. Obviously, depending on what happens next, it might get more complicated, but I think we've dodged that bullet. Good luck.
And we definitely, that's part of our strategy. Like, we talked to a lot of early stage funds, but we were in 500 startups in San Francisco, so that has just kind of opened some doors and have weaseled our way into a lot of those conversations, it is a totally different conversation. Not better, not worse, just different.
I'm a fairly new REC investor. I've been in the club for about 1.5 years. And I guess I've got about 8 companies I've invested in. And the thing that really, I guess, irritates me quite a bit about the process here is that the entrepreneurs, you're all complaining about these long lists, but it's very easy to just create groups to send out notices about how you're doing. As soon as I put money in, sometimes these companies just go into a black hole. They don't respond, they don't give you any updates. I've got 3 out of the 4 up there as part of my investor group, and I would say 2/3 do a fantastic job and 1/3 does an okay job. There are other companies who have been here. This is the second time around asking for money, and I think I've gotten 1 update in 2 years. So, I understand the issue of administrative problems, but if I look at Krista, I get an email from her almost every single month. I know very much how that company is doing. I know how John's doing. We got a little bit of a problem. You can complain all you want, but I think investors, we write the checks, we're entitled to get periodic, rigorous updates. And that's in your term sheets, and you should really try to abide by that. And I say to all the companies who come here and pitch, it's a big beef among investors. Just a statement.
And you're totally right. And I have a Google list that's my shareholder newsletter list, and it's got a lot more than the 77 so like stockholders and stock option holders and stuff. And so that is very easy. I think I was only referring to the administrative, when every shareholder actually has to vote, and you actually have to get signature pages out and say, hey, you bought this much of the note, and that's going to convert into this many shares at this day, and send your signature pages. And that was what I was referring to. I agree. It's not administratively. You can send an update out. I do mine every 6 weeks. Thank you for the nice words. I'm glad someone's reading them, like one person out of my 77.
So actually, I think this is a good illustration of what you don't, and by all means, I'm not, you got a great company, so I think you're doing fine. But as it relates to the response that you'll get, that's what you'll get. And I don't say that to call out John, because I know John and he's a good guy, he's an investor in our company, but you don't want that, because when they call him to ask him how you're doing and how your company is, that's not the response that you want. You want, and I'll give you guys an example. I'll give you a real life example. I was up pitching the Colorado Angels group in Fort Collins. And we do quarterly or biannual happy hours. We do quarterly calls and updates. We do demos. We do all these things. And I'm not joking. I'm in the crowd, or pitching the crowd, and a few of my investors are in there. And one of them, sure enough, starts grilling me on questions. And I'm like, you haven't been to any of our update calls? Well, for whatever reason, he wasn't getting the emails, he wasn't getting that. And it was a total administrative mistake. So it wasn't something that he wasn't being included in, but unintentionally, it had some pretty, important ripples there that, even gave me some insight that I can improve, right? So I've got to do a better job at, well, maybe we need to relook at our communication techniques. Maybe we need to be more thorough on what kind of data we're sending out, and maybe we need to record our calls and resend an email with a link. So, that way there's no confusion ever, because the last thing that you need is a soured investor, period. If you have that in your deal, you need to repair it fast, and you need to basically do what it takes to make sure that they feel appreciated, valued, and that they're in the know. Because if they want to know, you got to tell them. Simple as that.
So I'll just say, well, no, in all seriousness, one of the things as we grow, we're doing is professionalizing, moving from the phase of the business where we have to be opportunistic and balance all of the considerations to being a much more professional organization. So in our last round, we brought in a marketing person, and not every company can. We're at that point where we can afford that and B need that. And one of that person's jobs is going to be investor outreach, and that's not to say that the CEO and myself aren't going to be available, but we want to have somebody whose job it is to make sure that gets out when everybody's bandwidth is stretched. Because you're absolutely right, investors, you guys, the angels here, are the ones that are taking the biggest risk on the company. And the angels are the ones that enable us as entrepreneurs to move from just that idea to realizing that idea and to implementing. And we have to recognize the incredible risk that angels are willing to take, and the value that angels convey to us as entrepreneurs.